Welcome to the Black Gems Dive In Podcast, the podcast where we dive deep into conversations about inclusive cultures and everything DEI. Your co-hosts are Akua and Kendra, and we're thrilled to be your hosts as we explore the crucial topics shaping our workplaces and communities today. In each episode, we'll unpack insights, share stories, and engage with experts to foster a deeper understanding of how we can create more inclusive environments where everyone feels valued and empowered.
Hey, Kua.
Hey, Kendra.
It's been a minute.
Listen, y'all, we back.
We're back. I think we had to take a break. I mean, we came off of a high.
Yeah,
I would say
absolutely.
that coming off a Congressional Black Caucus about a few months ago. But now we're back because we have a lot to talk about.
Y'all, okay, so we have a week until Election Day. And so obviously we've been diving into a lot of different issues that impact what next week is going to look like.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of conversations that are happening just around what to expect. It's hard to put it all in words
And
for
process
real,
it. Yep.
You know,
Absolutely.
But here we are, y'all. So as we always do, we're going to bring you different issues that really impact you through the lens of equity, in which we usually do. But there's a lot to be said. And before we do that, we have a special guest.
We do.
Who, you know, it's not really a guest because this is his whole spot
Right.
in general, but we're welcome
The man behind the camera.
It's weird being here.
right? So
What's up,
Jamil
y'all?
Cruz, what
Hey,
up, what up?
What's up? How y'all doing? Thanks
We're
for
doing
having me
good,
on.
yeah.
It feels different being on this side. you
Yeah,
know,
I love
like,
it.
You know?
Being a part of the intellectual conversation.
Oh, my
You
goodness.
know? So,
Jamil always be telling us, y'all, just let it fly. We're like, Jamil, we got
Right.
Y'all know
to
me.
taper a little bit.
Listen, I don't have a muzzle on anymore. You know what I mean? So I could just I say whatever I want.
Exactly.
But no, I get it. You know, I mean, you guys are doing some phenomenal work, and you know, you don't want to piss off the the folk out here. You know, so but no, you guys are doing some amazing things, and I'm just really excited about this conversation today.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if we have some new listeners out there, Jamil, just introduce yourself really
let's do
quickly.
that.
Yes, Jamil Cruz, founder of Cruise Control Media and the Pod Hub. We are a multicultural marketing and communications firm based here in the city of Buffalo. We have a number of different verticals that we offer through Cruise Control Media, one of which is our podcast production, the Pod Hub. This is our podcast production studio. And then, you know, we have the new initiative that we're launching really soon, Pod Hub Plus, which is our streaming network, you know, that we're going to be launching pretty soon.
Let's wait. We gotta highlight that because he just kind of glanced over that a little bit. But yeah, talk about that Pod Hub Plus.
Yeah.
What is that? What
So
is that for the folks?
it's like, you know, think Netflix for podcasting, right?
Okay.
So all of the content that we produce out of the Pod Hub here right now, you know, I was just doing an audit of some of the numbers of all of the podcasts that we either have produced or either under production right now, and it's been close to 50. You
Wow.
know, so
Wow.
and right now currently under production, I think we're around like 24 right now.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
so we have a lot of shows, we have a lot of content that's coming out of this space, and I just wanted an opportunity to kind of put it all on one platform
Okay.
Absolutely.
and have an opportunity for the creators, people like yourselves and other folks, to be able to monetize, you know, and really be able to drive some revenue for
Let's
the
go.
podcast. Yeah,
We
so-
want to hear that as one of the flagship.
The flagship.
The flagship, not one
Y'all were the
of.
first. Y'all were the first.
Okay.
The
Yeah, y'all were the
flagship.
first. It's been 4 years.
Oh,
It's been 4 years.
so that's something else that we missed. We should have had balloons, y'all,
I
because
know.
we put this out on social media.
Right.
Happy 4 years.
We hit 4 years
Of podcasting.
podcasting. So I was looking at old videos. The first live podcast we did, which is so full circle moment, was for
Oh my
Leadership
gosh.
Buffalo.
Oh
Yeah,
man. Wait,
yeah.
was it virtual?
It was virtual.
It was
right?
virtual
Yeah, because it was
podcast.
during like the
COVID
pandemic
time.
and everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we talked about like healthcare and equity.
Yeah.
And it was at Jamil's old studio.
one.
Yes.
Oh, jeez, right.
And it
Old
was
spot.
right, and it was for Leadership Buffalo, which I now work
And
at.
employed
Yeah.
for.
And employed for
Okay,
it,
VP.
which is like, come on, little shout out. But it's just like full circle is crazy. But we've hit 4 years,
Yeah,
and we
man.
still doing this thing.
Yeah.
Y'all doing major things with this too, man.
Exactly.
You know,
Crazy.
So I mean, it's just been amazing to watch you guys over the last 4 years and the growth of it. And you know, one thing I constantly try to tell people as they come into these doors is you just have to be consistent with it, right? The more consistent you are, the more successful you're going to be with this thing. You know, so I've been doing this thing since 2017, and I was doing it when I was at my little 2-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
That had no idea what I was doing, using old DJ equipment, wasn't getting a dime for it, and now I'm getting like 5-figure contracts
Let's
and everything
go.
now.
Come
You
on,
know what I mean?
let's go. Come on,
yeah.
consistency. I love it.
Yeah. How did we forget that? You know, it's been 4 years.
Because there's a lot that's happening.
Well, that's true. It is a lot going on. But, you know, let's take a moment. You know, it's the power of now.
Yes.
Take a moment, celebrate. We've been doing this, and it's been an amazing journey, right? A lot of great opportunities that we've obviously highlighted. And our last episode was another one of those, right?
Yes.
Where we were at Congressional Black Caucus. And so if you haven't listened to that episode, take a listen, because we covered a lot of great information and talked about Project 2025 and the implications on DEI, but also the implications on us in general as a country, like, and where that comes from, because it's not new. This has been a playbook that's been followed for a long time. And so I think we're going to dive into some more conversations that kind of lead us into next week, which...
It's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be crazy next week, y'all.
This
election is not gonna be decided next week.
No, absolutely not. It's too close. It's too close.
Yeah. So before we do that, because that's our deep dive, we're gonna dive into our diversity dispatch, and that's when we bring you information around, you know, what's happening in this world. This is gonna be a little different take, because this episode will focus primarily on the election, on voting, and getting folks ready for next week. But this article for our diversity dispatch is coming from the HuffPost, and it says that the NAACP absolutely slams Dr. Phil's hard work claim at the Trump MSG rally. And so the NAACP called out Phil McGraw, and that's Dr. Phil, y'all, after he declared that America was built on hard work at Donald Trump's Madison Square Garden campaign rally on Sunday. McGraw, who endorsed Trump at the rally after interviewing him under the guise of asking hard questions earlier this year, said it's time to push back against cancel culture and intimidation tactics before tying it to launching his Merit Street Media company in April. And he says, we didn't choose the name for that by random. This country was built on hard work, added value, and talent, not on equal outcome, not on DEI. This country was built on hard work, the TV personality told the MSG crowd. And so the civil rights organization, the NAACP, came out in a post on X, and it wasn't having his comments, right? It said that the country was absolutely built on hard work, Dr. Phil, ... on the backs of Black, brown, and immigrants from all across this world, many of which who were forced to do so, slavery. And so, and then it said, let us know when you're ready to tell the whole story. And so there's a bunch of folks who have come out and talked about what this notion means. And this is something that's been kind of pervasive in the conversation around DEI. And we talk often about how people are pushing back against it. People are using different terms, didn't earn it, all these different things. And so there's been a lot of conversations around that in general.
Yeah. And also too, you know, when this initially came out, of course it was, you know, one of the things that we first saw on social media. But I always like to go to Bernice King's post all the time. And so she is the daughter of the late Martin Luther King Jr. And again, she's one of those people who challenged the myth of that our prosperity came solely from the hard work. And so in 1967, Martin Luther King wrote about the three evils of society, which I believe is poverty. I can't remember the full three, but I remember reading it back in school. However, what he said is, again, we have deluded ourselves into believing the myth that capitalism grew and prospered out of the Protestant ethic of hard work and sacrifice. The fact is that capitalism was built on the exploitation and suffering of Black slaves and continues to thrive on the exploitation of the poor, both Black and white, both here and abroad. And then she continues to say, we must confront our histories honestly. DEI isn't a trend, it's a step towards justice, addressing the systemic imbalances that linger from our past. Real strength is found when all people have an equal chance to thrive. And so I find it also too ironic that Dr. Phil himself got to start from Oprah. First of all,
a black woman.
A black woman.
A black woman.
You know what I mean? Like, so it's very ironic, you know, that he comes to the stage and he says this, but we know, you know, that at this point in time, as we get close to the election, is gloves off and everyone is just saying what they truly feel.
Yeah. Those three evils, just to let folks know, as the evil of racism, the evil of poverty, and the evil of war. And so, you know, tying that back into the larger conversation, there's a lot of rhetoric that's being passed around right now. And I think this is obviously another one of them, but I know we're going to dive a little bit more into some conversations, but at that MSG rally, not only was that said, there was a lot of other things that was said as well, right? The notion of Puerto Rico being an island full of trash.
Right.
The notion of, I think you know, he made a joke. There was a comedian that was represented at the Trump rally, and he talked about carving watermelon instead of pumpkins, you know, like the reference of pumpkins for Halloween. What else was said? I mean,
they attacked women's rights.
Yeah.
They talked about, it was so much that was just deplorable at that rally.
Right.
You know, and also too, what I find is also ironic is that I was listening to a clip yesterday that although he was attacking Puerto Rico and saying that it was a floating piece of garbage, there was someone who came with all the statistics of how many Puerto Ricans specifically live in these states with the narrow margins.
Florida
is one,
yeah.
Pennsylvania, Michigan, you know, and so it's interesting. It's just interesting.
Jamil, what you think?
Listen, I don't even know where to begin.
I know, that's why, like, there's times where I'm just lost for words.
I mean, honestly, at this point, I'm tired.
Yeah.
You know, I'm so over all of this rhetoric that's being spewed. I mean, it's just some really nasty, hateful rhetoric being spewed. But this is part of the playbook, right? This is part of the playbook,
right?
And they're doing everything that they can to divide and conquer, right? They're doing everything that they can to you know, with all of the misinformation and disinformation that's out there, and honestly, I don't think it's gonna be. They're gonna get the outcome that they're looking for. You know, I firmly believe that that he is not going to win this election. I firmly believe that. You know, I think, but by all measures and indicators, I think, and we see the polls. Everything is showing that everything is really tight. But I think that, you know, people. I'm an optimist, right? And I really feel like people are tired right now of just all of the hateful rhetoric that's being spewed, and it's really coming from one particular side, right? So, and yeah, a lot of the things I saw when I saw that rally, I was just, I mean, Trump made it acceptable and just okay for people to be hateful, right? There was a situation that happened. I think it was last night on CNN. It was an interview that was taking place. When you know, it was a gentleman who was on the reporter who said he was in support of Palestinians, and the other gentleman who was kind of debating him, you know, said something along the lines of, well,
Hamas,
and hope your pager doesn't go off or something like that.
Problem is, I get it. Nobody wants to be called Nazis. It's very inflammatory. But if you don't want to be called Nazis, stop doing.
You're called an anti-Semite. You've been called an anti-Semite more than anyone else's table. And people will sit there and no, by me. I never called you an anti-Semite. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying
I'm a supporter of the Palestinians. I'm used to it.
I hope your beeper doesn't go off. The thing is that
you just say I should die.
You should not.
No,
did you just say I should be killed?
No, I did not say that. No, I did not say that.
Hold on.
Did your guest just say I should be killed on live TV?
I said I hope
Guys,
you don't.
let me just stop.
You said you hope my beeper doesn't go off.
Because you said I'm a big supporter
of the Palestinians.
Of Hamas?
Guys, let me
I said
stop.
Palestinians.
Are you?
Am I what? No, of course I'm not.
Palestinians
I apologize.
Are you a racist, violent person inciting violence against
Ryan,
That's
disgusting. That is completely.
Then I apologize.
Good job, CNN. Let's have first block say the Muslim.
Which is, I mean, just pure blatant racism, right? So, I mean, and at some point we're going to have to get past this, and I think, you know, in a few years we're going to be able to look back at this era, these last 10 years of this Trump era that we've been in, and I think that people are going to look at themselves in disgust, right? That I think people are truly going to be like, you know, why they're going to question why they felt the need to stand behind such hateful speech, hateful rhetoric, and such. But it's nauseating, to say the least. But at the same time, there's a level of appreciation that I have for it as well, right? Because I think it's really exposing people. I always say, you know, go with the devil you know versus the devil that you don't know, right? And you know, if for a long time, I think there's been like a lot of closet racism that's been taking place.
Very true.
You know, so show me your cards. Then I know exactly how to deal with you.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, so I think, you know, with everything that's happening now, it's doing just that. It's exposing, you know, a lot of these things, and I think, you know, some people always say that you know, you can't heal what you don't reveal, right?
Interesting.
So now that this revelation is happening, I think we can get to a point of reconciliation now.
Yeah.
You know, and that's my hope. That's my hope that we can do that.
My hope is the same. However, I also think about how history continues to repeat itself. And so we go through this notion of reconciliation and healing, and then there's going to be another period of almost like a civil rights period, right? Of, okay, now we're two opposite ends of the spectrum. I truly believe that if it's not about race, it's going to be about gender. If it's not about gender, it's going to be about something else, right? And I feel like we're always going to be in this perpetual cycle in America, right? But I do hope that we do have some healing after this. I do think that, if Trump wins, there's going to be continuous hate.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
If Kamala wins, there's going to be continuous hate.
I was going to say
either way.
Yeah.
Either way. And so we have to be able to be prepared for both outcomes.
For sure.
And I know for me personally, I go back to 2020. Actually, 2016, when all of this first started coming about with the election with Trump. And I remember, Jamil, I was telling Kua this, we were at BNMC at the time.
Yep,
I remember waking up I remember going home and saying, oh, this election is not going to be determined tonight. Woke up the next morning, saw that Trump was president, and I cried. I cried. And I just remember sitting in that, but I also didn't know how to prepare for it.
Yeah.
But now, to your point, we know what the cards were being dealt. So it's now to prepare for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much to unpack and say as it relates to this election. I mean, first and foremost, polls, I just don't trust them after the 2016.
Yeah, and you really can't trust polls
election,
all the way, right?
Like, there's the reality is what we're also seeing on a specific side is already a challenge of what the results are going to look like. I think there's been conversations around, Tucker Carlson at the MSG rally also was one in which, he targeted Kamala's intelligence and her IQ, and there's a lot of questions around, there's no way that she could win, right? Because she's not even
man, when it comes to
intelligent, right? She's not even right, exactly. So I think there's a lot of notions around, y'all, we're gonna make noise now around the election, because if he does lose, what does that look like?
Right.
It probably will be a repeat of what happened on January 6th, and I'm hoping it's not the case, but I don't know. We've seen the cards once. I think we have to look at them again, and I think we have to a little bit later in our conversation, because we're probably.
I think people are more prepared this time around, though, too.
True,
right? Because what happened in the aftermath of the 2020 election with January 6th. This is something that I know we've never seen in our lifetime
at
before,
all. No.
Right.
No.
So we didn't know how to. I remember vividly watching that on television. Just my mouth just like. You know what I mean? Just like, what the hell is going on right now?
Yeah, man.
Right?
Yeah.
So we've seen the playbook now. So now we have to adjust because we know what can potentially happen.
Yeah.
And while the other side have been actively plotting over the last several years on the expected outcome of this election, I think people on the other side have been preparing for the plot too. So again, this is maybe I'm just a hopeful, optimistic.
You need to rub some of that optimism off, because it just right now, and that's maybe it's also, I don't want to position my feelings and emotions any which way either, right? Like, I'm just trying to be neutral and neutral in the space of, I can't try to attach anything to the outcome at this point in time. Like you said, I don't think it's going to be decided next week, right? Like, we're not going to wake up Wednesday, the 6th, and say, oh my gosh, we know who's president. I think it's going to be a long conversation, because there's also other things that have been happening too from a legal standpoint, and challenges that are already happening where they're saying, okay, this state, I think Georgia was one of them, where they wanted to do hand counting of ballots. And then it has to be registered or certified at a certain time. So there's
I think the Supreme Court struck that down.
Did they
struck it down?
Okay, because it was maybe too soon to the election to change that or something.
Yep.
But I'm just saying, there's a lot of rhetoric out there around what it could look like. But I don't know. I think we have to maybe later in the segment just talk about how you're going to prepare, because I do want us to have that conversation.
And we have to talk about how we're going to prepare in the aftermath of whatever, regardless, right? Because at the end of the day, life is going to go on,
regardless,
right? So how are we going to adjust? you know, in the aftermath of this election, you know, because we can't just kind of just sit and sit in this sorrow if we don't get the, you know, if we don't get the results that we want. You know,
that feels like.
Yeah. So we're just gonna have to move on.
Right. All right. So we gotta jump we went a little bit, yes, but there's a lot. That's why we had to come back and talk about all these different things. But you know, going off of what Bernice King said about addressing systemic imbalances that linger from the past, there was an article recently that came out from the ABC News, and it says 1960 civil rights protesters who staged historic sit-in finally have arrest records cleared. And just for a moment, just think about that. These people are still living. So it's not 1960s. Y'all. This is not like history, right? This is current. This is current time. So Simon Bowie told his mother and grandmother he wasn't going to get in trouble back in 1960. Then the Black Benedict College student sat at an all-whites only lunch counter in South Carolina and got himself arrested. Finally, on Friday, which was last week, that arrest and records of 6 of his friends were erased as a judge signed an order during a ceremony in a Columbia courthouse just a few blocks from where he sat at the segregated table some 64 years before. It goes on to say, Bowie remembered that promise. He went into the Eckerd drugstore. He knew the governor of the time had warned African-American college students not to get involved with the quote-unquote hot-heated agitators and quote confused lawyers who were insisting all people were equal no matter the color of their skin.
Now, can you imagine you in school?
Right.
And they telling you don't get involved with the hot-headed agitators who say you're equal based on the color of your skin.
Exactly.
At that point in time, you're in college, you're navigating your own career, you know, your educational career, and then he says don't get involved.
Don't get involved. Yeah. Right. Okay. Of course, what you gonna do? You gonna go get involved. Yeah. Right. And so it goes on to say, which I think is very interesting. It says several southern cities have held similar expungement ceremonies in recent years, as the young people who risked arrest and marrying their record are now older men and women. U.S. Rep and one-time House Majority Whip Jim Clyborne loved to tell a story of how he met his wife of nearly 6 decades, Emily, in jail after they were both arrested at a protest. And I'll pause there because...
Please pause.
Because, you know, when we talk about history, I keep doing this, it is current times. We had an opportunity to hear and meet Jim Clyborne a few months ago in Buffalo, right? And he's telling these similar stories. And he's telling us why he became, you know, the whip majority leader and, you know, representing his state. And he's still representing his state, right? So this is not the past. We are currently living in a lot of these different things. And
I think, you know, that's a great point because, you know, Representative Jim Clyborne, he gave us some really great information and insight when he visited Buffalo, and we were able to talk to him, where he says that, you know, America really has to center on what this country was supposed to be for everyone, right? And we'll probably play that clip from when we met him. He
said, and I have the quote here, it says, if America ceased to be good, it can cease to be great.
Right. And so in that notion, what is good? And we talk about like good trouble, right? And the notion of what that looks like in order to get to a position where most people can succeed.
Right.
If not everybody can succeed in this country. The article also talked about that back then, Black people would sometimes sit at an all-white lunch counter and refuse to leave. They were often arrested and then refused to pay bail. Jails became crowded. They were put on chain gangs. There was pressure to speak up and change the laws, and segregation was slowly and sometimes violently chipped away. And so I think that's a good thing to kind of sit in as well, right? Like this, we're talking about 1960s, and people have criminal records from protesting, being able to sit at the same counter with white people. And so back then, it was very controversial at that time, right? There's a lot of things that are controversial right now. And we're talking about things like women's rights and, you know, having full autonomy over our bodies. These are things that are being questioned at that level. I thought it was already decided with Roe v. Wade, but obviously that's been overturned at this point. But I think that's a good point just to say we're at a point in time right now where if we don't stand up for justice for everybody, it's only a matter of time before the country ceases to be great in that way.
You know? Exactly. And one of the quotes that I also too want to bring up, it says, "These men sat bravely, quite frankly, in the face of adversity, in the face of threats, in the face of death. They did it because they wanted to guarantee the Constitution applied to all Americans." And so, when we, similar to what Jamil was saying, we have to really think about what's next. We don't have an opportunity to lay down and just sit in what happened. We have to face adversity in its face, and we have to continue to fight on behalf of our lives and our children's lives.
Yeah. Can I say something to that too? I just had a conversation with someone before you guys came in, and we were talking about this a bit, because we were talking about it in the context of this whole idea around black men voting. We can talk about that more in detail later. But, one of the things that I was bringing up is that we don't have the luxury to really sit out, right?
Absolutely.
Because what we're doing now is not, we're not really fighting specifically just for us right now. Right? We're fighting for like the future generations that's coming behind us. Right. And I think oftentimes, people kind of get caught up in this bit of selfishness about like, what are you doing for me now? And like, I'm going to withhold my vote, until my demands are like, it ain't about you.
Right.
It's not we have to make sure that we are being mobilized and we are exercising our rights to vote, because the issues that we're fighting for or fighting against or for or against now is going to be issues that's going to affect my son, you guys as future kids, you know what I mean? So, and that's something we have to keep in mind. It's not about us right now. It's about this future generation and how they're going to be impacted.
I mean, that's on the opposite side. That's Project 2025.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
They're not fighting for the now. They're fighting for the future.
Yeah. For sure.
So.
And I mean, all these things from a legislative standpoint, they were fighting for a very long time, and positioning judges and doing a lot of the, strategic work to be in a position where you can then strike down a Roe v. Wade at that high level, or affirmative action in the education space at that level. And so, I know in our last episode we talked about being strategic and trying to position folks, and I think we're doing that now, right? Like, and a lot of conversation also was after President Obama won, a lot of people just sat back and said, "Oh,
we made it."
This post-racial
society.
Change gonna come was playing throughout the radios.
My President is Black by Jay-Z, like all this stuff was out, and folks took a collective like, oh my gosh, like we've made it now, and we got to this point. But the reality is that fueled a lot of folks too. Right, in a way that was just like, oh.
That woke up a lot of the closet bigots and racists and everything.
It did, right? And so now we're in a position where no matter what, we have to collectively be moving towards what that freedom looks like for everybody, right?
Because that rhetoric of hope is no longer present.
Hope turned into nope.
Don't boo vote. All the different things, but and I think on some of the most powerful rhetoric that I've heard recently is my girl Michelle Obama. And
she's been spitting lately.
Yeah, she's been spitting bars lately.
Put an ether beat behind that,
and I get it, right? And one thing that she always says is that we have to work twice as hard to get half of what other people get, right? And so that's going to continue to be, I think, setting the stage moving forward, unfortunately.
I'm tired.
We tired, but we gotta
hold each other up, and I think that's the piece, right? Like
we have no other choice, Kua.
We don't.
That's the thing. We have no other choice.
We don't. We don't. I'm just tired of this.
I know
that it's always a conversation. I think it was Toni Morrison who said like racism is a distraction. Ultimately, and being in this perpetual state of, oh my gosh, now what? Like it distracts you.
It does.
From your ultimate goals. Like imagine if we didn't have to deal with this day-to-day bigotry and, craziness, like we could focus on different things.
Just imagine how amazing this country would be if we didn't have to focus on these things. And this beautiful melting pot and the shining example of what the rest of the world could look like if if people weren't so gung-ho on maintaining oppressing and maintaining the status quo and having this false sense of power, right?
Right.
So it's just, I don't know. I mean, you would think that 2024 going into 2025, we will be past this at this point, but unfortunately we're not.
Here we are.
And there's always, I keep saying, it's always going to be something.
Yeah.
Whether it's race, whether it's gender. It goes back to Isabel Wilkerson's book, The Caste System. She compared America to India, and where a lot of people thought she was crazy, right? Going over and comparing the two, but it's the same thing. It's a caste system. Yeah. So something is always going to exist. So we have to continue to fight. But this right here, it's a lot.
It's a lot, y'all. Yeah. All right, we're gonna keep it moving. It's a lot to cover, and we said, y'all, we got a lot to talk about before next week, and trying to get this out to y'all this week so you can, just listen to our thoughts on this. But we're gonna take our deep dive, right? And our deep dive is going to be obviously around voting. We've already started to talk about it, but I actually just wanted to read or kind of highlight some of the items in this article from The Hill. And it says that ballot boxes burned in Oregon, Washington, and so it says authorities are investigating after 2 ballot drop boxes, and I think it's 3 now. Wasn't it 3? So this might be a little outdated, but the boxes were in Oregon and Washington on Monday, just more than a week out from Election Day. Officers determined an incendiary device was placed inside a ballot box in Portland, Oregon, when they responded to reports of a fire around 3:30 a.m. local time. Fire suppressant inside the ballot box protected virtually all the ballots inside, according to the county elections director, Tim Scott. Though 3 ballots were damaged, the affected voters will be contacted for their replacements. It says that we have multiple systems and security measures in place to ensure your ballot is safe. Around 4 a.m. in nearby Vancouver, Washington, officers responded to an arson at another ballot box and discovered a suspicious device nearby, according to a release from the Vancouver Police Department. It says, as reported by local outlets, the FBI is coordinating with federal, state, and local partners to investigate the 2 incidents. Like we said, I think it's 3 at this point. But this just goes to show that there's an attempt to disenfranchise the vote, right? And we often are having conversations. I know we've had conversations with younger folks who are just like, what does it really mean? Does my vote really matter? People would not go to this full-out extent if it didn't.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, right?
It's just amazing how on one side for years now they've been screaming election interference and and all of these things, and this is exactly. I mean, it's been in projection the whole time, right? Yeah. Because this is exactly what that is. It's election interference. It's voter intimidation to try to prevent people and scare people from wanting to come out to exercise their right to vote. And I think we saw something like this happen. I believe it was in Georgia where they tried back in 2020 where they tried to put some type of crazy law in place that prevented people from voting. And I think the numbers it far exceeded what they were actually even expecting for the outcome, right? Okay. So I really believe that these things really with the burning of the ballot boxes and things like that, these things are only going to energize people to get out and really making sure okay, listen, we see what y'all trying to do here. Y'all not gonna you're not gonna make us afraid to be out here and exercising our right to vote. So yeah.
I will say, this week I was having a conversation with a community partner and we were talking about voting and what that's going to look like next week. And I am a person who likes to vote in person day of. I don't know what it is. It's just the energy around it. Like I'm going to wake up early. I'm going to have, my little caffeine or latte. I'm going to take my behind in there and now I was feeling whatever.
Press the lever.
I remember the lever.
Grandma out here talking about pressing the lever.
That's what I used to
close the curtain.
Listen, when I voted with my parents. All right, y'all. They can play me because I'm showing a little bit of age, but
not the grandmother.
Y'all don't remember doing that with your parents?
That's why I'm laughing because it's 2024.
5,000 years ago.
I was gonna say push the button, but press the lever, push a button. Now we drawing in, filling in bubbles and such. But anyways, I'm a person who likes to do that day of, right? Okay. And so this community member was just saying, I'm trying to do early voting because the day of, I feel like there might be violence and all these different things. And so there's a lot of feelings behind what this is going to look like next week because the rhetoric, and not just the rhetoric, there's just a lot of action that is happening now. Ballot boxes being burned. Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
I will say though, I am encouraged by the amount of people who are going out and doing early voting. So Saturday in New York State was the first day for early voting, and I know at one point in time, one of our local community centers, the line got up to 2 to 3 hours long.
Wow.
When I went, it was probably
people actually stayed in line
people
too.
Stayed in line.
Yeah.
Like that's
what I'm saying. That's just exactly what I'm saying.
Right.
People stayed in line, and I actually, so I went to vote. I got out of line, but I went back the next day.
Millennials, lazy millennials.
Kendra does not like waiting in line. If you know anything about
If you know anything about me, I will not wait in the line.
She will cut you happily. So
let's say, hey y'all. I'm like, hey, how y'all doing? But I did go back the next day and I did cast my ballot. But it was very encouraging. I mean, you had, when I say like our seasoned citizens of the city, dragging chairs that had their scooters sitting on the side, and they were waiting. There was a lot of first time voters. They were ringing a bell for first time voters, there was just a lot of energy behind it. And that for me is very encouraging. That people are now trusting the system for early voting. I know my parents back in 2020 were like, I'm not doing early voting. Now they're like, oh, I need to go early vote.
What's their reasoning for wanting to do early voting?
They just didn't trust the system.
Interesting.
They didn't trust the system. I keep going back to my dad. You guys hear me talk about my dad a lot. Being from Alabama, my dad has seen some things when it comes to voting. My grandma experienced some things when it came to voting. You're talking about the chain gangs. My dad talks about that all the time, seeing it visually. And so going through what he went through in Alabama, and now you have this process of early voting, is like, are they even going to count my ballot? I was taught you stand in line the day of, and still to this day, my dad prides himself on going and being the first one at the ballot.
Oh, I love that.
At 6 a.m.
I love that.
So he's always, one year I think he was number 2 and you never heard the end of it. I don't care if it's school board election. I don't care if it's whatever. My dad, but he is the first one in line. And so he does the day of. My mom does the early voting now.
Interesting.
That's amazing.
There's an article, and I just looked this up really quick to see where we're at. And this is as of today at 4/22. More than 51 million voters have already cast their ballots. This is according to The Hill. And this is a tracker from the University of Florida. So more than 24 million mail ballots have been returned, and nearly 27 million early votes have been cast in person as around 4 p.m. today, right? So a lot of folks getting out. I think a lot of numbers being shown. I know in Erie County, they've even talked about the amount of Democrats versus Republicans versus independent voters versus, and I think there's like a fill-in or another, area as well. And so people are coming out, right? There's a lot at stakes.
I think what's going to be really interesting to see how, what the results are, especially when they tally up the early votes, right? Because for a long time, you have folks on one side who was screaming like, early voting is wrong, it's bad. And it's funny because if you mentioned the rally that they had at MSG earlier, and when I was watching clips of it, you can see up on the Jumbotron, they just had vote early. And even Donald Trump himself was telling people to get out there and vote early. And he was the main one who was pushing, that it's fraudulent, that,
back in 2020.
You know what I mean? So it's just amazing. It's going to be really amazing to see because this rhetoric that you put out there and this misinformation that you put out there about early voting for so long, it hurt him in 2020. Right? It hurt him in 2020. So it's just going to be really interesting to see how it plays out this year, because, usually by all indicators, when you have a large early vote turnout, it normally favors Democrats.
The Democrats,
right?
Yeah.
So, but I'm just curious to see how this one is going to shake out because they've been saying in many places around the country, there's been record voting in early voting.
Interesting.
Record turnout in early voting. So
it's a lot, y'all, and I know I don't like to look at the polls either, but I do look at, some of them when it comes to, how people are voting along gender lines, race lines, all those different things in some of the polls. I know we had talked about this prior to the podcast, but Kamala Harris and her camp came out with an agenda to help empower economic development and just empower Black men to go out and vote.
Yeah.
And so, Jamil, I just really wanted to get your take on some of the pillars that she has in her plan when it comes to some of those economic opportunities as being an entrepreneur, being a father, homeowner, all those different things. Just, curious on your take on that as well.
Yeah, I was really encouraged when she did put out that agenda for Black men, right? A couple of things that really stood out for me. I think the first one being that $20,000 forgivable loan for entrepreneurs, right? Because we know that small business is like the backbone of our economy here in this country. And oftentimes, especially with a lot of Black-owned businesses, we have a lot of kind of these solopreneurs. We don't have the opportunities and the access to resources to really be able to scale, right?
And employ others.
And employ other people, right? Because I tell folks all the time, we cannot grow and scale a successful company on our own, right?
Yeah.
You understand that. That's why you got employees and everything now, right? Yeah. So I think that's going to be, so critical. I know me as an entrepreneur, I've had my challenges with, and I've had some success over the last 7 years that I've been in business, but I've had my share of challenges at the same time, right? And part of those challenges, including not having the capacity to be able to, do the work and really maintain the work when it comes my way. So, and I've made a lot of mistakes. I've lost contracts and things like that. And I'm like, only if I had the resources, to be able to have, people come in to kind of help me with this work, so that's going to be huge. And even, I believe she's on like a $6,000 tax credit for parents when they have a child, I wish that was around 2 years ago. You know what I mean? Because they had a tax credit. I forget the amount it was. I know it wasn't anywhere near $6,000. But I know with me being a relatively new father, my son is 2 years old now, and my wife and I talking about the potential of having another kid, and even with you guys, because at some point you guys are gonna be married and have kids and things like that too. So that would be great to have that type of support, to be able to really be able to help you guys and help us with that. You know what I mean? So
I think that's a really good point, because there's a lot of conversations, and I talked to Kim on my team, right? For instance, and we talk about just how difficult it is and how this world is really not set up. I say this world, but the country is really not set up to support parents.
Right.
The costs of things are very high, right? So the economics it continues to go up. The cost to have a child is astronomical at this point. So have 2 or 3 or more, and you're looking at a real.
That's why I'm team one and done right now. Because the cost is too damn high.
Even like I have a friend who she's in California, and she talked about how even the built environment is not really set up for kids. So she wanted to take her daughter to like the playground, and there were folks who were having mental health issues and different challenges, and the swings were broken and all these different things. And so as a parent, hearing that there's some support, like the summer camps, I hear about how much those are, and you're probably not at summer camp age yet. But like
the
Kim talks about
to get in the summer camps,
to get in summer camps, and per child it's like $1,000 per week. So how do you do that realistically? And work and take care of everything else. So I think that's a really good point, as somebody who doesn't have kids, maybe in the future, maybe not. But
it's a conversation that we both have. Like, is it worth it? Can I sit in my auntie status? I love me some Zoe.
And I have friends. That's in our age. I'm a little older, just a little older than you guys, but just a little bit. But I have friends, who they're very content with not having kids whatsoever because they don't want to bring a kid into this world.
Right.
Yeah.
And like you said, the cost. I just got a letter. My wife and I just got a letter. Last week that our daycare cost is going up again.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So but my paycheck is not
right.
You know what I mean?
So
so and this is why I'm out here hustling. Right. With having a business while having a full-time job. So having that support, getting that $20,000 support. Right. So it all works in tandem with one another.
Yes. Absolutely.
So even from that perspective, I think, and we've kind of mentioned it here. Actually, when we did the Clementine takeover, we talked about the glass cliff and how oftentimes, we're put in position, people of color, women specifically, when things are kind of falling apart, now we can take over in that way. But one of the things that we talked about during that episode was just this notion of conversations that are happening on social media a lot, but in different, I wouldn't say friends circles, but adjacent folks that we know, and we have conversations, and they spew a lot of stuff, not always factual, right? And so one of the things that I just wanted to kind of talk to you, black man, about is this manosphere, right? And so there's this manosphere that's out there. I saw an interview recently on social media where I think it was, what's the guy that used to be on CNN, black man? He used to do the...
I know you're talking about.
Dang, what's his name?
No.
He's no longer at CNN, but he's doing
Don Lemon?
Don Lemon. So he was interviewing this young white man on a college campus. Did you see that? And he was just like, okay, so who are you going to vote for and why? And so he's like, I'm voting for Trump. And he's like, well, why? And so he's, the economics were better. Just a lot of things that you hear, right? And then he's like, well, where do you get your information from? He's like, definitely not mainstream media. And a lot of folks feel that way. But what that does now is put a lot of pressure in this other space of information. Where do you get your information from? And so, yes, we have a podcast. All this is our opinion. Right. At the end of the day, we do our own research. We, look at it through our own lenses, and we define what we see based on our own perceptions. Right. But now people are they're looking at the podcast as law in a way, right? And so he asked him, well, what podcast do you follow? Joe Rogan was the first thing that he said. And then he said, oh, you're in the manosphere. And he kind of chuckled to himself. But the manosphere is a space where there's a lot of stuff being thrown at them. And I feel like this is a position where there's a lot of black men who are falling in this space as well. And so we've had conversations about folks that we know, I won't name names, and some of the rhetoric that they're talking about, and I'm like, wow, where's this coming from?
They're being targeted.
Exactly.
It's another targeted plan. Yeah. The algorithms, this is why we talk about algorithms, AI, all these things. It's like the more you put in there, right, the stronger they can align with a specific prototype, on the other side of the phone. And so certain demographics are being targeted with this information. It is not lost on me that, and this is why Obama talked about it, where there are specifically, unfortunately, black men you hear that say, Trump gave us our stimulus check. Shut the hell up with that. But what I'm saying is that's just an example, right? That's just an example. But it's a specific plan, and there are people who are being targeted with this information.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we have, those individuals, they aren't well versed and well read on issues, right? Because again, I was having a conversation with a gentleman. I would still consider him a friend, even though we have a difference of major differences of opinions when it comes to this election stuff. And and he was saying something about how what I'm doing and the rhetoric that I'm talking about is really a part of this group think, right? And I'm just like, well, how is it that what you're doing is not part of it too?
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, if you are willing, and this is the one thing I had to tell him too, because he wanted to have a conversation with me, to kind of debate me on issues. But I'm like, if we can't have real, legitimate, honest conversations around topic, then it's no. I don't do this for play, bro.
Right. Yeah.
I'm out here really trying to change lives. I'm using my platform to amplify voices. I'm out here in community. Y'all are out here in community actually doing the work. I'm not out here for clickbait and trying to, drive up likes and everything on social media and on the internet. Right. You know what I mean? And he said something crazy and well, it's always been about the internet. So I'm like that's where you lost me, bro.
Right. Yeah.
That's where you lost me. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I just think we have to get past this machismo, only, men need to be in these powerful positions. And cause it's bro, we're in 2020 going into 2025. We got to get past this, bro. We have a person in Kamala Harris, who I believe is competent. She's intelligent. She's strong. and she has a plan for not only for us as Black people, but for the country as a whole.
And not a concept of a plan.
And definitely not a concept of a plan. So why not get behind her? Why we are at what point do we not become intimidated by strong women?
I think that's the real question, and I think that you see a lot of rhetoric. And so I'll spend time, and I know, like, I feel like one of the first episodes we talked about not reading the comments and things like that, but I do, because I want to get a general sense of what people are feeling and what they're saying, and, you know, like, just the general sense. And not that that's law, right? But there's a lot of conversations, and I said this a long time ago, I think the social media stuff, especially in the Black community, Black women and men, it is pitting us against each other in a way that
is very intentional.
You know,
it's very intentional.
It's not good for the benefit of us as a people, right? And so there's intention in driving these podcast conversations and men versus women and all this. But at the end of the day, we are the unit, right? Like, we are the people who need to look out for our community and come together in order to solve some of the greatest systemic issues in our communities. And so I think there's a concerted effort on that, but that then lends itself into conversations around this election. And so there's a lot of conversations. And I also have to put some kudos out there too. I think there's a lot of rhetoric that says Black men are not going to vote for Kamala and Black men aren't going to show up and it's going to be Black men's fault. I don't agree with that.
I don't believe that.
You know, I don't agree with that either.
And you even look at the past election and the numbers, and they're in alignment with, you know, how we generally vote. And
I think there was a poll that just came out on ABC. Just did a poll. Yeah. And Kamala Harris is actually polling I think 16 points, I'm sorry, ahead of what Biden was at this point in the election in the last cycle with Black men. With Black men. You know what I mean? So, the negative stuff is always going to be amplified. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast, right? So, but I think overwhelmingly we're going to see Black people, Black men, in droves come out in support of Kamala Harris. And I can tell you, because I've been a part of these conversations, right? You know, I'm a part of this group called Women with Black Men, right? So, I remember the first call that we had, it was over 40,000 Black men on the call. 40,000 Black men. I was just on there again the other night when we had maybe close to 20,000 Black men on there.
You know what I mean? To your point, there are some things that are just not being highlighted.
Exactly.
You know, we're seeing the opposite end, but there's things that are just not being highlighted. And I think this kind of, you know, goes into our just like last even part of the conversation is about, okay, so we have the now what, you know, or the so what, you know, so now what, right? What's next? How do we prepare ourselves for the next piece of whatever happens, right? You know, we know that there's people out there who are still undecided, you know. What conversations do we have to, first of all, have them, number one, go and vote, but what conversations need to take place, you know? How do we prepare ourselves as Black women, as Black men, as entrepreneurs, as community members, as fathers, mothers, whoever? How do we prepare ourselves for the next phase of our country, right? I always say that, you know, the president is not the silver bullet. And so no matter if it's Trump or Kamala, they are not the silver bullet, but we know that they kind of set the tone. And so we really have to, for me, you know, the way I look at it too, is like we have to continue to focus on our local politics.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You know, we have to focus on our local politics. If you are in Buffalo and if you are paying attention, we have a new mayor. And that mayor actually goes up for election next year, right? In 2025. And so there are also other candidates who are seeking that election as well. Get involved, understand the issues, ask questions, bring other people with you, you know. If there are certain policies or initiatives that are not being seen for you in this city, ask those questions, because we see that our last mayor was mayor for almost 20 years, right? And so this next mayor is going to set the tone. Get involved in school board elections. School board, we have 3 at-large members who are
this year. That's next week.
Start next week. So school board, you know, they're educating our babies who are also a part of our community. Right. So even if you don't have children, get involved. So there's so many different things that we can do. Local judges, so many seats that are up for election and re-election, but we have to get involved, you know.
We do. And I think, you know, just going back on our conversation, we had started to talk about like how do we prepare no matter what, right? And Kendra started to talk about the local elections and getting involved, but I also think we have to prepare ourselves mentally, right? Because it is taxing. This is taxing. You know, this cycle. I can't tell you how many text messages I get did you vote? Or, vote from both sides.
Yeah.
Talking about voting and all this stuff. And it's just...
I asked you 6 times, Jamil.
Exactly.
I'm like, what did I sign up for that I keep getting all these different things?
Right. I'm like, is it a data breach? Like, what's happening over here? But I do think we have to protect ourselves in the mix of all this, right? Yeah. Because there's been just this push and pull for so long. I think you calm down a little bit, but now, because it's next week, everything is amplified. And so as we get ready to go into next week, things that I'm thinking about, because I am thinking about some safety stuff, y'all.
I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking about safety.
I am.
And yes. Okay, continue.
You know what I mean? But, and it's exactly that, right? Because we've seen what it brings out of people. And there's so many emotions. It's not like I could just look at you and say, okay, we have differing opinions. It's pulling at the identity of folks. And so I think that takes it to another level. So for me, going into next week, how am I preparing? I am looking at my calendar. I'm not going to hold y'all and seeing what's on there, because I need to have, a part of me needs to have a safety plan. Like it sounds like a lot.
I agree with you. And that's something that we brushed over earlier. The safety plan is real. And even something very small and minor, right? I saw in my emails today that JetBlue is doing a sale. I like to travel. JetBlue is doing a sale for winter vacations that actually ends in 2 days. Jamil, hop on it. Yeah. Ends in 2 days.
Yeah,
and I was looking at, where do I want to go in January? Because that's when we typically need to get out of Buffalo because it's cold and snowing. But I'm thinking, let me hold off, because I don't know what's going to happen with this election.
Right.
First of all, am I going to be able to get back in the country? Like, these are things that I think about, and it's real.
Yeah.
It is real.
But the fact is that we even have to think about stuff like this. It's real. I mean, it's unfortunate, though, that we, and I had this conversation. It takes me back to a conversation that I used to have with my wife, right? About, like, if I was to ever get pulled over, like, and kind of playing out those scenarios and things like that. Yeah. And like, it kind of takes me back to something like that, right? And it's unfortunate, and I get it. This is, these are real things that we have to consider and think about.
I am literally looking at my schedule next week and seeing what meetings I have when. Because the day after the election, I have like a very early meeting. And so it's just like, I don't know what it's going to hold. I don't know what it's going to bring out, but I am thinking about safety. I mean, I've had a lot of conversations with folks who are talking about now registering to get a gun and having safety in that way. I will tell you that the last election, 2016, I took a course. I took one of the pistol permit course. Went through it. It was sponsored by the NRA. I went through it. I never followed through with the paperwork because I'm like, y'all, do I really have to do this? But I felt very impelled at that point to do it. And now you're starting to see these stats, ammunition, gun purchases, all those things are increasing. And so a part of me feels like, maybe that's something that I do need to consider again.
Prepare for the purge.
Who knows, right?
Or have you noticed when people greet you or when they leave you and they say, have a good day, be safe? That I've noticed that's been an increase. Or someone has said, like, there's been black men who said to me, have you got your pistol permit yet? Yeah. Like, literally almost in most conversations that I'm having.
And especially, we have friends in other states in the South and all these, and in the South, it's nothing, right? Like, that happens all the time. People, they locked and loaded with their stuff. But in the North, I think it's a different type of conversation for us. I've never shot a gun before, and so the reality is, even if I did get that, I need to get lessons. I need to learn how to use it and just, be prepared for whatever, you know what I mean? Because there's such a concerted effort for everybody to have guns in this country. So what does that look like?
Right.
I mean, we just experienced 2 years ago a mass shooting that happened in our community right next door, right? From where we do business every day. And so I think I don't want to put fear out there, because I also know what I believe in, and I know that, there's a higher power that guides, how we navigate, but at the same time, preparation is not a bad idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just not, you know.
Well, I mean, listen, I appreciate the work that you guys are doing to educate people, to, really mobilize people out here because it's needed, especially for us in our community right now. A lot is at stake with this year's election. But again, maybe it's the optimism in me, regardless of the outcome, I think we're going to be okay.
We will be
I
okay.
think we'll be okay.
I keep
because
saying we have no other choice.
Right, it is.
That's the spirit of us.
We have no other choice.
Yeah.
We have no other choice.
We are the most resilient people on this planet.
Yes, even though I'm tired of being resilient, but we are.
We are. Yeah.
We are the most resilient.
Right. We really are.
You know, so but we just gotta keep up the fight. You know,
Absolutely.
keep doing the work that we're doing.
Right.
And I think, you know, again, regardless of the outcome, you know, we're gonna be okay.
Absolutely. So. All right, y'all. Let's transition into our last segment, which is our gem of the day. Of course, we always got to put a gem out there, and so
Look at Kendra looking at me.
Go ahead, start us off.
I have two things. I would say the first one is find joy. Joy is resistance, and so whatever whatever it looks like for you, you know, find joy in what you do, find joy within your family, find joy within different activities that you take on, whether that may be traveling, whatever the case may be, but find joy because you deserve it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I came across a quote the other day and I took a screenshot of it because I absolutely loved it. And I think it ties back into what we were talking about. And it says, competition happens at the bottom. The people at the top are collaborating. And I found that to be very interesting. And like I said, it ties back in today because, Jamil, you had said something earlier where you were talking about there's so many people that talk about me. What is this going to do for me and for self, right? But that's low vibrational, right? like the kids say, right? But how are we collaborating and how are we coming up with our own playbook in order to continue to advance what's next for the next generation? And so we need to sit in this atmosphere of collaboration, not competition, because that's the only way that we're going to continue to be resilient and win. So that's my gem.
That's a great gem.
That's a great gem.
That's a great gem.
I'm next.
You can go next.
Okay. I really want to, you know, in the spirit of this election cycle, right, just really emphasize the importance of us getting out and exercising our right to vote. And I want to talk specifically to Black men right now. Again, I mentioned this earlier. We don't have the luxury right now to sit out. Our community needs us. Our Black women need us. Our sons, our daughters, our nieces, they need us. They need us to step up and be the leaders and the kings that we've been called to be. So I think it's crucial that, you know, regardless of whatever, you know, your feelings are on, you know, on who is doing what for us in our community, that we are, you know, we have that seat at the table. Because if your right to vote didn't mean so much, then people wouldn't try so hard to take it away from you.
Yeah.
You know, so, and this is a quote that I saw that said, voting is one of the most powerful tools Black men have to shape the future of our communities. It's about having a say in decisions that impact our lives, from healthcare to education, criminal justice, and economic opportunity. Every vote is a voice, and when Black men show up at the polls, we bring our issues to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and make a statement that our voices and our futures matter. So I think that's going to be, you know, is crucial. And one last thing I will leave you guys with, I actually want to leave people with a resource, right? Because they're, you know, crazy enough, you know, at this point in the election cycle, even though we're like a week away, there's still people who, you know, don't know what some of the issues are. There are people who might not even be registered to vote. So there's a website that you can go to. It's called votetolive.org. That's vote, VOTE, 2TO, live, LIVE, votetolive.org. If you go on that website, you can check your registration status. You can request an absentee ballot. You can actually see what issues are on your ballot in where you're voting. You can find your polling place. You know, so there's a number of different, and you can, you know, if you need a ride to the polls, you can request that as well. You know, so votetolive.org. Go on there, exercise your right to vote, and make your voice heard this election.
Dope. I love it. And so my gem of the day, I think, oftentimes we center how we show up in the world, and I think about a Ghanaian saying, and it's Sankofa, right? And that is, in order to go forward, we have to look back. And I think in this election cycle, in this voting cycle, there's a lot of conversations about, what people lost to get us to this point in time, right? Like from a historic standpoint, we just talked about these folks during the 1960s from the sit-ins who are now getting their records expunged all these years later, right? Like after the fact. And so when I think about the concept of Sankofa, to look back in order to know how to move forward, we have a lot to look back on and see patterns that have happened in time. We talked about history repeating itself as well. And so this quote comes from the Millennial Therapist, and it's by Sarah Kubrick, and she says that we only repeat the lessons we didn't learn the first time. Pay attention when life wants to teach you something. And I think I just want to leave us with that in mind, because a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with is not new. We treat it as such because it's new to us and our generation, but older generations have already dealt with a lot of things. People have dealt with different types of regimes that have been in power and things like that. And so I implore all of us to do research, go back and look at what happened back in history, get a sense of what that was, so that we can not repeat the mistakes of yesteryear, right? Like we're in a position to do better. And I think it's on us all to do better, get together, collaborate, like you said, and make a difference for the world that we want to see.
Yeah. And talk to our elders in our community.
Absolutely.
They have so much knowledge.
It's wealth of knowledge.
Wealth of knowledge. Like sit down and like break bread with some of the elders in our community, and we will automatically get, some of that information. So but y'all, we did an hour,
right?
An hour worth of conversation. So we're gonna wrap it up. But we just wanted to come back ahead of elections to have this important conversation. But get out and vote, and do your research. So
do it up. That's another episode's Black Gems Dive In podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see y'all next time.
Bye, y'all.
Peace.